Good afternoon, everybody. I'm your host, Stella Adams, and welcome to this week's edition of Doing Justice Brings Joy. There, there is a world of things that have happened over the course of the last week. I feel like it's been a month since we've been together because of everything that happened last week. Last week's weekend should have started as a period of joy and rebirth and reflection as we celebrated the death and resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ. It was also Passover during the same period, and it should have been a period of peace. Instead, we got a the president said on Easter Sunday, using expletives I will not use on this podcast. Plus, I get booted off for using the language that he used in demanding that Iran capitulate to his demands or he would bomb their civilization off the face of the earth. That's how what should have been Resurrection Sunday started. But on Monday, we were reminded of the majesty of the Lord. We had 4 astronauts that circled around the moon in Artemis 2. And they took extraordinary pictures that showed the majesty and beauty of this universe. And they also had photos that showed us the fragility of the earth and the uniqueness of our earth in this solar system. We are all traveling on this same planet, and we got nowhere to go. There's not a moon base there. Surely there will be in the next maybe 30 years, but not right now. And yet we're seeing earthquakes, natural disasters coming at an outrageous pace. Yet we have a president who said on Tuesday, it's too much. It's too much. That, we just don't have enough money. We just can't take care of folks on Social Security or Medicaid or Medicare or any of those safety net type programs. We just don't have the money for that because we need the money for war. We need $1 trillion for war, but we can't afford to feed the hungry, to protect the widow, the orphan, and the stranger, to visit the prisoner and to set the captives free. We don't have money or resources for that, but we have money for tax breaks for the 0.01% at the expense of the least of these in our society. This is all in 1 week. All in 1 week. We have a ceasefire that's not a ceasefire. Oh, Lord Jesus. I went, I am, I rarely, because I'm immune compromised, I rarely get out and actually buy groceries myself or go and grab a sandwich. My goodness. A basic meal at a Whopper with cheese meal, $10? No, we'll be doing that. We'll be talking about budgeting, family budgeting along the way, but this week. And then you have the Epstein files. Lord, I have not talked about them and I do not intend to. But Ness popped up with the First Lady. Pam Bondi is scheduled to testify, but they're not going to let her testify. But they made Hillary Clinton, who is not mentioned one time in the Epstein files. There's a photo of her. Ghislaine Maxwell was on a +1 at Chelsea's wedding, but that's the only contact she had with them. But she was forced to do 12 hours of testimony before Congress. And the First Lady is coming out saying that there were a lot of falsehoods, and I believe her. Okay, this is not about, and I applaud her coming out asking for the Congress to hold hearings, but the people who need to be called to testify should not be the victims, but rather the list of perpetrators and alleged perpetrators, known, and those who are redacted should be unredacted. That's who should be testifying. The women have been through this ordeal for most of their adult lives, and their childhoods were stolen from them. I'm just trying to get through this week. Tonight, we need to have our astronauts in our prayers as they will be re-entering the earth, coming home to their families and to their loved ones. They're our heroes. They're who we should be focusing on. Are you all aware? Because I used to, many, many years ago, when it was just something to do, I served on the draft board. Yeah, they still had one, but it was not active. But Trump and Hegseth are quietly reinstating the draft and making it automatic to be registered for the draft if you're 18 to 32, but you can't register to vote automatically. He didn't go, he dodged the draft. Let's just call him what he is, a draft dodger. He forbade his sons from entering the military, saying if they did, he would disinherit them. Yet he wants to send our children off to wars that he is playing soldier. As a military brat, I can tell you, that war is no joke. As a child of a man who fought in Vietnam, in Cambodia, in Korea, and was flying over doing cryptography at the Bay of Pigs, who watched her father suffer from PTSD, who saw him die from Agent Orange exposure. No, war is not a joke. Putting our soldiers from Fort Liberty right here in North Carolina, 3,000 of our people are put in harm's way so he can play soldier. Our men and women in uniform are not little toy soldiers that he can play with and pretend that he's some big general. I'm praying that an honorable ceasefire and peace agreement can come out of tomorrow's meetings. And I hope that we are being honest and not playing games with people's lives. The Iranian government thought that the ceasefire that they agreed to covered Lebanon. And apparently we were playing games. And 300 people died after the ceasefire in Lebanon. Israel is trying to steal 20 miles worth of territory from Lebanon. We have become imperialist. We have put the world in chaos. My sister almost couldn't come and see me for Easter because the price of gas is close to $7 in DC. Plane tickets are out of whack. Grocery prices, y'all better go to Lowe's and Home Depot and Rose's and get you some tomato plants and peppers and some collards, and y'all need to be growing y'all some food, okay? Y'all need to, I'm gonna invite somebody from Ag Extension to come and talk to us about growing our own vegetables and Dick Tree Gardens, going back to having Dick Tree Gardens, because we're going to have to feed ourselves because we're not going to be able to afford food in the grocery store. We need to go to the farmers market and support our local farmers. I read a story this week about a farmer, a poultry farmer fighting against Tyson because they basically have turned him into a sharecropper. And he owns his land. But the way they send him diseased chickens, and the live chickens end up being theirs, and the dead chickens are his problem. We're going to be covering, let me tell you what we're going to be doing from now until June 30th. I'm going to be focusing on economics. I'm going to try to keep all this noise out of my head and out of your ears. We're going to focus on what we can do to make change. Okay? What we can actually do to make change. And every week I'm going to highlight between now what we can do at city council meetings, county commissioner meetings, school board meetings, general assembly, what we can do to make change. And I'm going to start by just laying the groundwork. You may remember that I did some episodes about last year about the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which is just crazy. And so I want to talk to you about a covenant that we as participants in this community need to take. We need to do more than march. We need to hold people accountable. If you want our votes in the fall, legislators, county commissioners, you judges, district attorneys, you need to keep a covenant with us. In our state, our public institutions have been failing in their promise. In North Carolina, part of the line I love most and have used most as a centerpiece comes from our state toast. I also like our state motto, which is what I am calling you to do. Our state motto is to be rather than to see. To be rather than to seem. That's our state motto. But in our state toast is a aspiration and commitment to be a state where the weak grow strong and the strong grow great. We don't leave the weak out. We build the weak. We protect the weak. We help the weak grow strong. And then once they're strong, the strong grow great. Everybody moves up. Upward mobility is the covenant that the state of North Carolina has made with its people. It's a foundational promise of public investment. It's not charity. It's not pity. It's not noblesse oblige. It is structural logic of a functioning economy and a just society. And it is the principle now under direct assault from Washington and from Jones Street. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what the Beautiful Bill Act is really doing. It is ugly. It is ugly. It is creating compounding problems in housing, education, and disaster recovery. It is in North Carolina shifting the map of counties in distress. And then I want to talk about the role and responsibility of Council of State members. We talk about the legislative piece all the time, but I want to focus in on that too. The One Big Beautiful Bill has Medicaid cuts. It has SNAP. It is just a mess. It's just a mess. It takes away housing resilience. It has weaponized disaster recovery. Do you realize that Congress, that they have written rules in this Trump administration that they can they'll allocate the money, but they can come back at any time and freeze it based on different things that have nothing to do with fraud and abuse or misuse of money. They also, and this is a dangerous thing, they also are recalling all the unallocated funds. So we need to make sure our government is on its toes in allocating and spending down money that we get from the federal government in a timely manner. Oh, and I forgot last week, it's so much, that Leandro was rescinded. And in a 4-3 decision, the state Supreme Court, vacated the Leandro decision, leaving, again, burdening our local governments in a tragic way. What is going on with housing is just a mess. I'm gonna take a minute and share with you some data. I'm pulling it up, and I apologize to you for that, but I need to be clear about the costs that we're having to deal with. The One Big Beautiful Bill signed into law on July the 4th, isn't that ironic, 2025, is the largest rollback of the federal safety net in modern American history. $911 billion with a B dollars in Medicaid cuts over the next 10 years. Work requirements that the Congressional Budget Office projects will cause 7.6 million Americans to lose Medicaid enrollment by 2023. And the work requirement is impossible. But I'll get to that, and I'll do the math for you in a minute, okay? Restrictions on provider taxes that North Carolina uses to finance its Medicaid program, and the elimination of enrollment simplifications that help eligible families maintain coverage are all happening because of the passage of this bill. This bill at its core is a tax extension for high-income earners, financed by the dismantling the programs that make it possible for the wheat to grow strong. It does not shrink government so much as it redirects it away from public infrastructure of shared prosperity towards the private accumulation of concentrated wealth. But I want you to be clear, we talk a lot about what it's doing in Medicaid, but Medicaid is only the first front. The big beautiful bill is a stimulus, is simultaneously a five-front assault on the safety net. It attacks health care, food assistance, housing subsidies, disaster recovery, and public education, while shifting the administrative costs of managing the wreckage that this bill makes on the states, and then the state is pushing it down on the counties and cities that are least equipped to absorb it. The big beautiful bill reduces federal SNAP spending by $187 billion. It expands work requirements from adults ages 18 to 54 and stretches that to adults 18 to 64. I gotta work. I'm old. I've worked my whole life and I'm poor. You can't make it on a minimum wage job. And now you're going to make me work 40-hour week? Come on. Don't get me. It eliminates exemptions in terms of this work requirement for caregivers of children 14 and older, veterans, adults experiencing homelessness are exempt, have no exemption. Former children leaving foster care when you turn 18 and are no longer in the foster care system, and you need food assistance and things because you're still a child, okay? And they don't have stable employment. And then if you don't have stable employment, you can't get the benefits. And if you don't have the benefits, how are you going to get? This bill breaks the historic federal commitment to fund 100% of SNAP benefits. Remember, SNAP benefits are feeding the hungry. Feeding the hungry. If you are a Christian, it is your duty to feed the hungry. Because when Jesus comes back, that's on the checklist. When I was hungry, did you feed me? What you have done for the least of these, your brothers, you have done for me. It's in the red letters. But we're not gonna feed the hungry. We're gonna buy some drones. In the past, SNAP benefits were funded 100% by the federal government. 100%. For the first time since the program's creations, states must share benefit costs between 5 and 15% depending on payment error rates. And the administrative cost sharing burden shifted from 50-50 to 25% federal and 75% state pays for it. Shifted that burden. In North Carolina, 1.4 million people out of the 11 million, 1.4 million people receive SNAP. And I want you to understand and hear this number, okay? 581,412 children. A half 581,412 children are in danger. 151,793 elderly adults receive SNAP. North Carolina counties, your county government, this is where you need to be watching budgets. Have they made arrangements? Have they looked at the budget and put in additional staffing in the department? Because the eligibility requirements mean that every county department of social services will have to absorb these costs directly. That 75% is going to be broken down by the number of recipients in each county, and it's the county government that's going to have the employees to check for eligibility, to recertify people, to make sure people have it. Is that in your county's budget? Have they made allowances for that? The Georgetown Center on Poverty and Inequality projects that state SNAP budgets will more than double under the act, with some states facing increases of, get this, this ain't Stella saying this, is Georgetown Center on Poverty and Inequality, Georgetown University. Some states are facing increases of 300 to 768% in their costs. This is not reform. It is the federalization of hunger risk and the localization of hunger cost. Let me repeat that. This is the federalization of hunger risk and the localization of hunger cost. Oh, but if that were all they were doing to our families, our neighbors, and our friends. The bill rescinds, that means takes back, all unobligated funds from the Green and Resilient Retrofit Program. That's about $837 million in grants and up to $4 billion in loan authority, eliminating climate resilient upgrades for HUD-assisted multifamily housing. That means that public housing is not going to be rebuilt to withstand hurricanes. So we keep putting the poor back in the same situation. At the very moment that hurricanes, flooding, and extreme heat are accelerating the deterioration of the affordable housing stock, they're going to come and rescind over $4 billion, almost $5 billion in funds, in grants and loan authority, to build back better, right? Now, there were not all bad things in the big beautiful bill, but cumulatively, okay, the bad clearly outweighs the good. But we have to, we need the good that's in there. It does permanently expand the low income housing tax credit. Um, and it's a 12% increase in the 9% tax credits. And it reduces private activity bond threshold from 50 to 25%. So those are a good thing. But here's the kicker, right? If you don't have to pay taxes, then why do you need a tax credit? So I threw that out there, and one of my a town councilman said, "Oh, they want the tax credit because they get a refund." I was like, "Well, what?" Yeah, even if you have zero corporate tax, you can get a tax credit which amounts to us paying you for the money. I couldn't even understand it. Everything goes to the rich. Nothing we don't have enough funds, allegedly, for the poor. In a state, the president's proposal would make historically significant cuts to HUD's housing and homelessness programs beyond what the bill itself contains. In a state where no full-time minimum wage worker can afford a modest apartment anywhere in the state, the withdrawal of federal housing resilience funding is not an abstraction. It is a guarantee that the gap between housing need and housing supply in North Carolina will widen. HUD is imposing new rules for disaster recovery. HUD has expanded its authority to terminate grants if awards no longer effectuate program goals or agency priorities. So if you live in a state that does not effectuate program goals or agency priorities, it is introducing a discretionary kill switch. For North Carolina's $1.4 billion CDBG disaster recovery allocation for Hurricane Helene, these provisions create compliance risk, administrative burdens, precisely at the time when North Carolina communities need rapid, unimpeded assistance. And we still can't really forget that there are over 700 families in eastern North Carolina that still need assistance. There is a hidden cost that the headline numbers do not capture. The law does not merely cut programs, it shifts the cost of administering shrinking programs to states and counties. North Carolina's 100 social services offices must now build a verification infrastructure for expanded SNAP work requirements. They have to implement every 6-month Medicaid redeterminations, doubling the current workload. They have to navigate the PRWORA and SAVE verification for disaster recovery applicants. They have to absorb 75% of the administrative costs of administering SNAP and manage provider tax restructuring for Medicaid financing, all while serving populations made more desperate by the coverage and benefit losses this same law creates. Okay, our county governments. So our county governments have been this burden put on their shoulders. You need to understand that when you get your tax bill from the county, they have the money still, you robbing Peter to pay Paul. And you're giving tax cuts to the rich and putting this burden on local taxpayers. The bill converts county social service departments from agencies of assistance into engines of exclusions, buried under the compliance mandates designed not to improve programs, but to shrink their risk. This is designed to make people poor, the disabled, the young, and the elderly, the ones the very Bible told us to take care of. It is making it impossible for them to do that. Again, President Trump stated that Medicaid, Medicare, and daycare were simply too costly for the federal government to sustain. We're a big country. We have 50 states. We have all these other people. We're fighting wars. It's not possible for us to take care of daycare, Medicaid, Medicare, all these things. This is his quote, okay? It's not possible for us to take care of daycare, Medicaid, Medicare, all these things. This was not a policy proposal from the president. It was a confession, an explicit presidential declaration that the social contract is unaffordable. But his war is not. The admission arrived alongside the physical dismantling of the U.S. Department of Education. The headquarters is being relocated. The staff is cut by more than half. Programs scattered across the Health and Human Services, Labor, and Treasury, and $2.3 billion in proposed cuts that would consolidate most elementary and secondary programs into a block grant, $4.6 billion short of the programs it replaces. North Carolina receives over $3 billion annually for education, one in every $5 supporting public education. More than 14,000 North Carolina educator salaries are partially federal funded. We could lose 1,000 teachers and $165 million education funded. At the same time all this is going on at the federal level, the Supreme Court of North Carolina dismissed the constitutional mechanism for enforcing educational inadequacy. At every level, the government is abandoning its obligation, and it's just, I don't even know. This bill does not relieve North Carolina of its obligations. It intensifies them. When federal programs retreat, the state government becomes the last structural barrier between our neighbors, our friends, our family, and free fall through the safety net to disaster. Yet the General Assembly is talking about moving corporate income tax rates towards zero. What we need the General Assembly to understand and answer this question is whether they will extend that same urgency to slow moving disasters, right? We need them because they haven't even passed the budget yet, to be real. We need them to pass the budget with consideration of all these new obligations that have been thrust upon our counties, and restructure their role. Okay, we need to suspend any kind of scheduled reduction in tax burden on the corporate entities, and we really ought to think about um, increasing corporate taxes to at least until we understand the depth of what this is going to do. We also need the General Assembly to think about with now that Leandro has been vacated, stopping reducing the expansion of the voucher system to people of higher incomes. They need they need to take that money and pour it into public education, which is a constitutional right of every child in the state. We need them to stop supporting homeschooling, getting vouchers. If you don't need a voucher if you're at home, they need to cut that program out. The question before the General Assembly has a duty to fund, to support housing, affordable housing, increase wages, increase the minimum wage, to provide a safe and sound education to every North Carolinian, to keep our state clean and green, and to keep so that it remains the goodliest place on earth. Oh, see, they don't teach this history back anymore. We need the General Assembly to keep its commitment to help the weak grow strong and the strong grow straight. The question before the General Assembly is not whether we can afford to invest, because we can. It's whether or not, when federal law is simultaneously cutting health care for 10 million Americans, stripping food assistance from working families, rescinding housing resilience funding, weaponizing disaster recovery compliance, and shifting hundreds of millions of dollars in administrative costs to our poor Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 counties. The One Big Beautiful Bill is the most comprehensive federal retreat from the social contract in modern history. North Carolina leaders must decide whether the state will absorb the retreat or resist it, whether they will build a state where the weak grow strong and the strong grow great, or where federal abandonment becomes state complicity. I'm going to be devoting each week, starting next week, with a deep dive. We're going to start with housing because April is Fair Housing Month. Then I'm going to talk about education. Then for the first May broadcast, or the one that leads up to May Day, I'm going to do one on wages. We're the best place for business, but the worst place for workers. You put your money where we have given way too much to whom much is given, much is required. And we need the corporate community to bear their fair share of what's going on in our community. So here's some actions that we need to take. I'm going to call this section Actions for Advocates, and that's how I'm going to close out from now until June 30th. I'm not just going to talk, but I'm also going to have actions. We are living in a moment when the federal government has stepped back from the social contract, but the covenant does not disappear when one party retreats. The covenant becomes the work of the people. So here are actions that we as advocates can take. First, tell the truth about the harm, not in abstractions, in stories, in data, in lived expertise. Name the responsibilities of the Council of State. We're not going to be giving them a free ride. Today we talked about the legislature and what they need to be doing, and I'm going to have more details about that. But we're also going to hold the governor accountable, hold the secretary. All of you would be amazed at how much each council state member, what powers and authorities they have. And we're gonna make them use them. The governor has power. The Secretary of State has power. The Secretary of Labor has power. The Secretary of Agriculture has power. The Superintendent of Public Instruction has tremendous power. And they sit and they have enough, if they act in concert, they have enough votes to make a difference. We're going to organize across county lines, but we need to start at home. Victory begins in your block, fighting for your neighbors and your friends, going to the county commissioners, making sure their budgets are prepared for the onslaught of people, of homelessness, of distress, of hunger that is going to besiege their counties. Several counties in eastern North Carolina have already thrown their hands up and said, we can't do this. We don't have the money. The burden is, we don't even have the taxpayers. We don't have enough taxpayers to even bear the burden. Distress is local, and we have to take responsibility. We have to hold our elected officials accountable. Don't elect somebody to the county commission who doesn't have a plan on how they're going to deal with this problem. Defend public education as a moral obligation. In North Carolina, it's more than just a moral obligation. It's a constitutional right. And I don't care what the Leandro court says, we're going to make sure that every one of our children in North Carolina gets a safe, sound education. And we are not going to divert. We're not going to divert our hard-earned tax dollars to support kids at homeschool or in religious schools. Not going to do it. We have to fight and understand housing, shelter is a human right. Jesus expects us to shelter the poor, to open our doors to the weary, to be like the Good Samaritan. We have to stand with disaster impacted communities long after the cameras leave. The recovery is important. They're cutting resilience funds. We could prevent a lot of things if we properly plan for the disasters we know are coming. But recovery is not instantaneous. Recovery often takes 10 years. When you lose 126,000 homes, that's how many were destroyed in the mountains, 126,000. That doesn't get rebuilt in 18 months. That's a long-term plan. We have to refuse to let the federal retreat become state complicity. We are the stewards. We are the stewards of the promise that the weak grow strong and the strong grow great. We got to hold up our neighbors. We got to make sure that our neighbors are protected. We need to make sure that our prisoners are not abused, that the women prisoners, that there's in the budget for feminine support and hygiene. That has to be put in the budget, the county budget. Check and see if the sheriff, who you elect, is providing proper care for prisoners under his charge. And I'm going to say this and then I'm going to go. I'm 5 minutes over, but I started 7 minutes late. May we be the people who choose covenant over convenience, justice over indifference, and truth over silence. May we be the ones who repair the breach. And may we remember that doing justice is not a burden. Doing justice brings joy. Thank you for participating in this podcast, and I will join you next week.